Rover had driven down this bridleway. All three men were shot through the head at point-blank range. Detectives say they're keeping an open mind, believe the killings have all the hallmarks of a gangland murder. Although the dead men have yet to be formally identified, detectives now say they're believed to be known criminals, but they have no idea why they were murdered. Andrew, they were working on a theory that the dead men, aged between 20 and 40, were involved in some sort of criminal activity. But they still haven't identified them or found out a dismissed this today. Detectives believe they were victims of gang warfare, through and recovered shotgun cartridges. Police are holding a news conference shortly in which they're expecting to discount any direct connection between the dead men and whoever pushed the ecstasy drug responsible for Leah Betts. The youth was questioned by detectives here at Basildon Police Station and failed to appear before magistrates on January the 10th. The conduct of the police is clear effect. Police are still trying to track down the main suspect.
Just my hand to the new constitution, take up the power for the new revolution. Smiling, we'll never change all around. Playing like a town player, just like yesterday. And I get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
Let me break it down for you. There's a group of ex-detectives who claim they are experts, and they try to belittle me at every opportunity, saying I know nothing. I haven't got no evidence. They've got all the evidence. They know everything. They claim they've unearthed new evidence, which they say is compelling. Compelling's a favourite word of theirs. So let me break down, point by point, their new evidence. Point one. These ex-detectives say that 3 witnesses saw a Range Rover containing Tucker Tate and Rolfe on the night they were murdered on the Rettendon Turnpike, which is a big roundabout near the murder scene, between 11 and 11:45 p.m. The police say, and the evidence says, that the 3 men were murdered at approximately 7 p.m. So if the ex-detectives, the experts, are correct, the police are wrong. Simple. Now, I know that the ex-detectives are wrong because there wasn't 3 witnesses, there were 2. I can't name them for legal reasons, but one is Mr. W and the other is Mr. T. Okay? The 3rd witness is Mr. W's wife, and she was sitting at home and gave evidence, not about seeing dead people driving cars. She simply gave evidence about the time her husband came home, things they watched together on the TV, and evidence of that nature. So from the outset, they're wrong. 2 witnesses, not 3. Point 2. The ex-detectives say that the 3 witnesses came forward after a chance meeting with Chris Bowen, who was Michael Steele's solicitor, several years later after the event. Well, let me tell you how long several years is. They came forward after a chance meeting, whatever one of them is, 11 years after. 11 years after the event, they came forward. That's point 2. Point 3. The ex-detectives claim that these 3 witnesses contacted the murder incident room after they'd seen the Range Rover. They're not specific about what day or anything, but shortly afterwards. And They reported what they'd seen, and the ex-detectives say Essex police did nothing. That's what they're saying. I can tell you now, that is totally untrue. At no stage, not even 11 years after the event, did these three witnesses contact the police. That is a total fabrication. Point 4. The ex-detectives say that the three witnesses' statements have never been disclosed. Now that is a bizarre and unusual statement to make if you know the facts. I say that because the three witnesses never went to the police. They were spoken to by Michael Steele's lawyer, Chris Bowen. Chris Bowen wrote their statements down and recorded interviews with them on tape. So why would Chris Bowen disclose the statements he had wrote to himself, right? The police have never took statements from these people. So to say that the statements have never been disclosed is misleading and troublesome, really. They're trying to imply that the officers involved in this case were corrupt or inadequate in some way, which is not true. Point 5. The ex-detectives say that the CCRC, I'll just explain who they are briefly. The CCRC is a body that if you're convicted of an offence, you can appeal to them after you've been through the appeal courts, the appeal process. If you've got new evidence or you think your trial was not conducted properly, you can apply to them. They will look at your evidence and they'll either agree with you or disagree with you. If they agree with you, you get a full appeal. And if they disagree with you, you get nothing. Another point to make is you can't keep going back to them with the same evidence, because obviously the whole system would just be clogged up. They'll look at your complaint, they'll deal with your complaint, but whatever decision they reach is final. You can't keep going back to them with the same evidence. Okay? So these ex-detectives are saying the CCRC took statements from these three witnesses. And you'll be surprised to learn I agree with that. That is what happened. Okay? The ex-detectives then say, in response to the application made by Steele's lawyer, Chris Bowen, the CCRC examined the statements made by the three people, and they said that their evidence was plausible. It's the exact word they used. It was plausible. And the ex-detectives say that, and again, I agree with them. Point 7. The ex-detectives then say that the CCRC, after saying the evidence was plausible, totally ignored the three witnesses. That is a whopper. An absolute whopper. A lie. Misinformation. Untrue. Call it what you want. That did not happen. I promise you. It did not happen. The following are facts, not theories, not things I think. They are facts. Absolute facts. I am in no way, shape or form calling the integrity of Michael Steele's solicitor Chris Bowen into question. However, it is a fact that he went to a petrol garage before the murder trial on Steele's behalf. Darren Nichols had said at 5 o'clock Steele had pulled up outside the motorcycle shop in Marks Tay in his red Toyota Hilux. But this receipt, timed at 5:01 p.m. on the day of the murder, seemed to be absolute proof that Steele was elsewhere. It is a fact solicitor Chris Bowen also produced a credit card receipt signed by Steele showing he was buying petrol some 8 miles and at least 20 minutes away from Marks Tay. Additionally, the till receipt showed that Steele was buying 4-star petrol. The Hilux, which Nichols claims Steele was driving, ran on diesel. As far as alibis go, this was as strong as they get. And Steele knew it. It's shockproof, rockproof, and everything else, he said. Unfortunately for Steele, when scrutinised, his shockproof, rockproof alibi quickly began to crumble. The till receipt didn't necessarily relate to the credit card slip. Anyone could have bought that petrol at the garage at 5 p.m. Steele's former sister-in-law, Phyllis Stanbrook, whose evidence that he had been home around the supposed time of the murders did so much to support Steele's version of events, had not been asked to give evidence or make a statement until a few months before the trial. She was absolutely crucial. So why wasn't she contacted sooner? That question was intriguing enough on its own, but when prosecutor Andrew Mundy QC began to question her at Steele and Womesy's trial about how she could be so sure of the date she and her daughter visited Steele's house, her answer surprised everyone. That's the day the solicitor, Chris Bowen, told me it was, she admitted. Let's say he spoke to you on March the 1st, said Mr. Munday. If I had asked you on February the 28th on what date you went round to see Mr. Steele, what would you have said? Mrs. Stanbrook paused for a moment, then replied, I would have said, I can't recall. I shall say no more about the evidence this solicitor has gathered on behalf of Michael Steele, other than they are the facts. As I have said, it is true that the CCRC described the evidence as plausible. I have also said it is totally untrue that they ignored that evidence. After the word plausible in that report, there are pages and pages and pages of things that the CCR did to check that evidence. 94 pages altogether in the report, and a lot of it is about those 3 witnesses. Okay, I shall read to you now what the CCR said after they had written the word plausible, when the ex-detectives said they did nothing. To the authorities at the time, it was only 11 years later, following a fortuitous conversation between Mrs. W and solicitor Chris Bowen, that these witnesses agreed to provide their information. When asked why they had never come forward previously, all 3 individuals stated that they did not consider it to be relevant to the Rettendon murder inquiry. Okay, so there it is. The witnesses did not call the police after the murders. They didn't. In Mr. W's witness statement to the CCRC, dated the 12th of August 2007, there is no mention of the registration number of the Range Rover, which he claimed he saw in December 1995. However, in the interview with Chris Bowen on the 18th of May 2007, Mr. W stated that he could remember that there were 2 4s in the registration number. He confirmed that he did not write down any details from the registration number at the time of the incident. He also confirmed that he had seen the registration number plate in television footage subsequent to the murders. In the interview with Chris Bowen on the 18th of May 2007, 12 years after the murder, Mr. W described the rear seat passenger wearing a white T-shirt. The CCRC observed that Tate was not wearing a white T-shirt on the night in question, and nor were the other 2 victims. However, a photograph of Tate was shown during subsequent television news coverage of the murders, which depicted Tate wearing a white T-shirt. The CCRC considers that Mr. W's assertion implies that at least some of his account may have originated from the television news coverage of the murders. The CCRC also noted that a comparison of Mr. W's statement with that of his wife revealed an inconsistency in their accounts. Page 5 of Mrs. W's statement includes the following comment. I also remember that when my husband first mentioned this to me, when we saw it on the TV, that he remembered the end of the lane being taped off by the police, and he had seen this when he drove home the same way. That helped him to put two and two together. The latest he would have arrived home would have been about between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. The CCRC observed that the victims' bodies were discovered just before 8 a.m. on the 7th of December 1995, so it seems unlikely that he could have seen the lane being taped off by police when on his way home from work. At page 3 of his statement, Mr. W states, "My work finished at about 6 on Thursday the 7th of December 1995. Nothing of note occurred during my return journey, which was the outbound journey in reverse. I got home at about 7:30, 8 a.m. and went to bed." Having considered these points, the CCRC observes that there are a number of reasons why the Court of Appeal might decide that the proposed new evidence is not capable of belief. The CCRC notes in particular that Mr. W describes a Range Rover approaching the Rettendon Turnpike from the north, so that's coming down from Chelmsford, which is absolutely incorrect, and turning left, i.e. east, towards Southwood and Ferrers. It appears, therefore, that the vehicle had already passed the entrance to Workhouse Lane when it was seen by Mr. W. It follows that, if it were the victim's vehicle, the Range Rover would have either had to turn around and go back to Workhouse Lane via the old A130 or travel to Workhouse Lane via Rectory Lane and across the fields of Whitehouse Farm. The CCRC considers the latter scenario to be highly unlikely, as it would involve crossing the fields, lifting the lock gate out of its footing, turning the Range Rover around in the lane for no obvious reason, and then replacing the lock gate into its footing. Mr. W says he saw a Range Rover at 11:45 on the night in question. It must follow from that the occupants of that vehicle were at liberty at that stage. If this were the victim's Range Rover, it leaves more than 4 hours unaccounted for in terms of their movements on the evening in question. No explanation has been found for why the victims did not attend their dinner at the Global Net Cafe, or for the fact that they did not make telephone calls even to explain where they were. Doubts remain over those aspects of Mr. W's account which appear to link the incident which he describes to the victim's Range Rover, i.e. his partial memory of the registration number and his memory that the rear passenger wore a white T-shirt. The witness statement of his passenger, Mr. T, does not add anything of substance to the statements of Mr. and Mrs. W. For the reasons given above, the CCRC takes the view that there is no real possibility that the Court of Appeal would find the proposed new evidence grounds for allowing an appeal in this case. There is no real possibility, in the CCRC's view, that the court would conclude that the proposed evidence might reasonably have affected the decision of the jury to convict if it had been heard at trial. Okay, so there it is. The witnesses, the three witnesses, did not call the incident room, call the police after they claim what they saw. It didn't happen. Finito. Despite this compelling evidence, there's that word again, the ex-detectives claim that they recently took statements or interviewed these three witnesses and took them to the crime scene. They claim that they are very credible. They give compelling evidence. They recollect the partial number plate. They are adamant about the sighting, and powerful new evidence was ignored by the CCRC. The claims made by the ex-detectives and the statements, if they have made any, by the three witnesses raise lots of questions. If they are saying 27 years on that they remember things they couldn't remember 11 years ago, then I'm afraid they are far from credible. Mr. T, who was the passenger in the car, said at the time he didn't even know where he was. He was just, imagine 11 o'clock at night, it's pitch black, you're a passenger in a car, he's probably half asleep. He told, when he made his statement, he said, I don't even know where I was. So he's not much use to anyone. As I've said all along, it's totally untrue that 3 witnesses saw the Range Rover, or claimed to have seen the Range Rover. There was only ever 2 people, not 3. Mr. W was driving, Mr. T was the passenger, and Mrs. W was at home minding her own business or whatever she was doing. But she was at home, no question. So why are these ex-detectives insisting that there's 3 witnesses? Because 3 makes the evidence sound stronger. 1 person might be wrong, 2 people might be wrong, but not 3. That's why they do it. It's misleading. So, in fairness to the ex-detectives, I've got no idea where they got their evidence from, by the way. But they keep saying they've seen all the evidence. I've got no evidence. They know more than me because they're ex-policemen. And they know better than me. So, in fairness to them, maybe this is what's happened. There is another Mr. W, same surname as the other Mr. W, who was claiming he saw him between 11 and 11:45. But this Mr. W said he saw them much earlier. And unlike the 3 witnesses, this Mr. W, he actually rang the police straight away the next day or something and told the police what he saw. And so he's already streets ahead, in my estimation, of the other 3 people. He saw the Range Rover. The next day he's obviously heard on the news what's gone down. And he thought, shit, that's that car I saw. And he's rang the police immediately. And they came and took a statement from him. And this is his statement. I was travelling along the A130. I went through the Rettendon Turnpike in the direction of Chelmsford. When you come through the Rettendon village and into a de-restricted road area, the road then goes into a series of bends on a decline in the road. Because I am a regular user of the road, I am aware that on these bends there is situated a farm shop and a gun club on the right-hand side of the road. And I am aware that there could be vehicles waiting to turn right. As I entered this decline, I became aware that the vehicles in front of me had slowed down. This would have been about 250 foot earlier than I would have anticipated stopping. I slowly caught up with the vehicles in front, but I had to brake quite heavily in the end because I had anticipated that any vehicle would be turning into the farm. I then stopped in the line of traffic, and I believe I was either 2 or 3 cars from the front of the line. I believe I was stationary for approximately 10 seconds when an oncoming vehicle left a gap for the vehicle that was turning right to cut across the traffic. As it did, I could see that the vehicle was a 4x4 vehicle, and because of the shape of the rear of the vehicle and a grille over the rear lights, my immediate reaction was that it was a Range Rover. I believe that this vehicle was dark in colour, and I think it was possibly green. I don't know why, but I think there were at least 3 people in the vehicle, and I think there may have been 4. I was aware there was a driver of the vehicle who was in the dark, and a person who was sitting in the rear of the vehicle behind the driver's seat. This person, who I believe to be a man because of his size, appeared to be bigger than the driver. He was wearing a light fawn-coloured upper garment. As the vehicle started to turn, I got the impression that the person in the back looked over his shoulder in the direction of the Rettendon Turnpike. The vehicle then went into a farm track that I did not know existed. I then continued my journey along the A130, and because I wasn't aware of the farm track, I looked down the track and I could see the rear of the vehicle that had turned into the track, but I do not remember seeing the reflectors of any vehicles in front of it. I then continued my journey home. I believe the time that this incident occurred would have been between 1850 hours and 7 p.m, but it normally takes me about 30 minutes to travel home from there. Raymond was 46 at the time he saw the vehicle. He did go straight to the police. They did take a statement within a week or so, and he was called by the prosecution to the Old Bailey to give evidence at Steele and Wounds' trial. So he was deemed credible. Okay, he got a couple of things wrong. Well, he got one thing wrong, actually. He said there was guards on the back lights. Now, if I tell you not to think of a pink elephant, the first thing you think of is a pink elephant, because that's what's in your head. Someone says to me, Range Rover, I don't think of a Range Rover Sports, I don't think of a Range Rover blah, blah, blah. I think of the Range Rover those three were in 1995, because that's what's lodged in my brain. My image of a Range Rover is that. So maybe this guy has got a neighbour or lives near a farm or whatever, and when he thinks of a Range Rover, he thinks they've got guards on the lights. He might be wrong, he might be right. But I'll just remind a few of you at this time, when I put the landlord video up about who saw him in the pub at 8 o'clock or whatever time it was, they were going, oh, he could have got the car colour wrong. Maybe it was black, it might have looked, it's blue, but maybe it looked black. And Tucker, who had a jacket on, a blue anorak type thing, with 2 white stripes down the arm, well, maybe he mistook it for a Crombie. Maybe he mistook Tate's bomber jacket and Rolf's bomber jacket for Crombie's. Well, if you can mistake a blue anorak with 2 white stripes down each arm for a Crombie, this guy who gives this statement can get the fact wrong that the lights at the back didn't have guards over them. Okay? It's plausible. It's compelling. I think it's actually true. Not only do I think it's true, I think there's a lot of evidence that supports it, which is important. When this guy says, as the Range Rover turned into the lane, the guy in the back looked over his shoulder towards Rettendon Turnpike or something, but he's looking back towards the road, okay? Now, think about this. Mick Steele's in the back, right? He's taking these 3 guys down to the lane to murder them. He's already been told, right, that Tate was going to double cross him on this robbery. They were going to rob him, okay? So he's thinking, shit, has Tate got someone following this car, and when I get down the lane, they're going to iron me out? Or he's thinking, I'm going to murder these 3 so-and-sos when we get down this lane. Let me look over my shoulder and make sure we're not being followed by a witness, or someone's not standing there or sitting in their car writing the number down. That's why I think when that car's turned into that lane and that guy's looked out the back window, he's turned around and looked, that for me is Michael Steele checking he's not being followed. I don't like giving theories because people can disagree with them. But you can't disagree with facts, right? You can't disagree with the truth. So these are the facts. This is the truth. I've explained to you what the CCRC does, right? You can go to the CCRC and you can say Billy Jasper murdered Tony Tucker, Craig Rolfe and Pat Tate, and this is the evidence we have got to support that. The CCRC look at that and they investigate it and they come to a conclusion. You can have your appeal, or it's a load of shite, we're not entertaining it. Billy Jasper has been through the CCRC and it has been dismissed. Paul Edwards' phone call, the last phone call to Tate, which has been called new evidence, was investigated by the CCRC 12 years ago. Boltoys, Patsy Clark, whatever his name is, part of the Jasper thing. It's part of the Jasper evidence, we're told. So it's been looked at, it's been investigated, it's been put in the bin. Ice on the Range Rover, was it there all night? The fuselage of shots at midnight, that's been looked at by the CCRC 12 years ago. ice on the Range Rover has been looked at by the CCRC 12 years ago. So someone please tell me, I'm not going to say anything rude or anything libelous, nasty, nothing. I'm just asking a simple question. Why are these ex-detectives publishing stories in newspapers? I believe they're making a documentary, and they're on these forums and on these pages and on YouTube saying they've discovered new evidence. Every bit of evidence I've seen is at least 12 years old. And when Mick Steele's hearings being done, and when the documentary's out, we're going to present Essex Police with our report. What is the point? You cannot take one of those points, one of them, back to the CCRC and get an appeal or get a hearing or even get them to look at it, because it's all been looked at, it's all been dismissed, it's all dead in the water. Tell me, what are you doing it for? Some people think that every time there's a news article, the article is full of the name of this ex-detective's company, right? So it would be fair to assume they may be doing it for publicity. What company doesn't want publicity? I'm looking for a detective agency or security thing, and I read in the newspaper that this firm are solving murders and doing wonderful things. I'll give them a ring. They might be doing it pro bono, but they're still getting a benefit from doing it. If their time is valuable, as they constantly tell me, right, why, oh why, are they investigating Jasper? Are they investigating Paul Edwards? Are they investigating the fuselage shots? Are they investigating the 3 witnesses? Are they investigating the ice on the Range Rover? It's all been done 12 years ago. It's finished. It's dead in the water. You are wasting your time. So, answers on the postcard, please. Over and out. One truth.